Chapter 10. Years pass. The season came and went. The short animals' lives fled by. A time came when there was no one who remembered the old days before the rebellion, except Clover, Benjamin, Moses, the raven, and a number of the pigs. Muriel was dead. Bluebell, Jesse, and Pincher were dead. Jones, too, was dead. He had died in an inebriate's home in another part of the country. Snowball was forgotten. Boxer was forgotten, except by the few who had known him. Clover was an old stout mare now, stiff in the joints, with a tendency of rheumy eyes. She too was she was 2 years past the retiring age, but in fact no animal had actually retired. The talk of setting aside a corner of the pasture for superannuated animals had long since been dropped. Napoleon was now a mature boar of 24 stone. Squealer was so fat that he could with difficulty see out of his eyes. Only old Benjamin was much the same as ever, except for being a little grayer about the muzzle, and since Boxer's death, more morose and taciturn than ever. There were many more creatures on the farm now, though the increase was not so great as had been expected in earlier years. Many animals had been born to whom the rebellion was only a dim tradition, passed on by word of mouth, and others had been bought who were never heard mention of such a thing before their arrival. The farm possessed 3 horses now besides Clover. They were fine upstanding beasts, willing workers, and good comrades, but very stupid. None of them proved able to learn the alphabet beyond the letter B. They accepted everything that they were told about the rebellion and the principles of animalism, especially from Clover, for whom they had almost filial respect, but it was doubtful whether they understood very much of it. The farm was more prosperous now, the better organized. It had been enlarged by 2 fields which had been bought from Mr. Pinkerton. The windmill had been successfully completed at last, and the farm possessed a threshing machine and a hay elevator of its own, and various new buildings had been added to it. Whymper had bought himself a dog cart. The windmill, however, had not, after all, been used for generating electrical power. It was used for milling corn, and brought the handsome money profit. The animals were hard at work building yet another windmill. When that one was finished, so it was said, the dynamos would be installed. But the luxuries of which Snowball had once taught the animals to dream, the stalls with electric light and hot and cold water, and the 3-day week, were no longer talked about. Napoleon had denounced such ideas as contrary to the spirit of animalism. The truest happiness, he said, lay in working hard and living frugally. Somehow it seemed as though the farm had grown richer without making the animals themselves any richer, except, of course, for the pigs and the dogs. Perhaps this was partially because there were so many pigs and so many dogs. It was not that these creatures did not work after their fashion. There was, as Squealer never tired of explaining, endless work in the supervision and organization of the farm. Much of this work was of a kind that other animals were too ignorant to understand. For example, Squealer told them that the pigs had to expend enormous labors every day upon mysterious things called files, reports, minutes, and memoranda. There were large sheets of paper which had to be closely covered with writing, and soon they were so covered that they were burnt in a furnace. This was the highest importance for the welfare of the farm, Squealer said. But still, neither pig nor dog produced any food by their own labor, and there were very many of them, and their appetites were always good. As for the others, their life, so far as they knew, was as it had always been. They were generally hungry. They slept in straw, they drank from the pool, they labored in the fields. In winter they were troubled by the cold, and in summer by the flies. Sometimes the older ones among them racked their dim memories and tried to determine whether in the early days of the rebellion, when Jones's expulsion was still recent, things had been better or worse than now. They could not remember. There was nothing with which they could compare their present lives. They had nothing to go upon except Squealer's list of figures, which invariably demonstrated that everything was getting better and better. The animals found the problems insoluble. In any case, they had little time for any speculation on such things now. Only old Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life, and to know that things never had been, nor could be, much better than or much worse. Hunger, hardship, and disappointment being, so he said, is the unalterable law of life. And yet animals never gave up hope. More, they never lost, even for an instant, their sense of honor and privilege at being members of Animal Farm. They were still the only farm in the whole of country, in all of England, owned and operated by animals. Not one of them, not even the youngest, not even the newcomers, who had been brought from farms 10 or 20 miles away, ever ceased to marvel at that. And when they heard the gun booming and saw the green flag fluttering and the masthead, their hearts swelled with imperishable pride, and talk turned always towards the old heroic days and the expulsion of Jones, the writing of the seven commandments, the great battles in which human invaders had been defeated. None of the old dreams had been abandoned. The Republic of the Animals, with which Major had foretold when the green fields of England should be untrodden by human feet, was still believed in. Some day it would be coming. It might not be soon. It might not be within the lifetime of any animal now living. But still it was coming. Even the tune of Beast of England was perhaps hummed secretly here and there, at any rate, and a fact that every animal in the farm knew it, though no one would ever dare to sing it aloud. It might be their lives were hard, and that not all their hopes had been fulfilled, but they were conscientious that they were not as other animals. If they were hungry, it was not from feeding tyrannical human beings. If they worked hard, at least they worked for themselves. No creature among them went among two legs. No creature called any other creature master. All animals were equal. One day in early summer, Squealer ordered the sheep to follow him, and led them to a piece of waste ground in the other end of the farm, which had become overgrown with birch saplings. The sheep spent the whole day there browsing in leaves under Squealer's supervision. In the evening he returned to the farmhouse himself, but as it was warm weather, told the sheep to stay there as they were. It ended by their remaining there a whole week, during which time the other animals saw nothing of them. Squealer was with them for a greater part of every day. He was, he said, teaching them to sing a new song, for which privacy was needed. It was just after the sheep had returned, on the pleasant evening when the animals had finished work and were making their way back to the farm buildings, that the terrified neighing of the horse sounded from the yard. Startled, the animals stopped in their tracks. It was Clover's voice. She neighed again, and all the animals broke into a gallop and rushed to the yard. They saw what Clover had seen. It was the pigs walking on hind legs. Yes, it was Squealer, a little awkwardly, as though he had not quite yet supported his considerable bulk in the position, but with perfect balance. He was strolling across the yard, and moments later, out from the door of the farmhouse, came a long file of pigs, all walking on their hind legs. Some did it better than others. One or two were even as trifle unsteady as though it would have liked to support of a stick, but every one of them made his way right around the yard successfully, and finally there was a tremendous baying of dogs and shrill crowing from the black cockerel, and out came Napoleon himself, majestically upright, casting haughty glances from side to side, and with his dogs gambling all around him. He carried a whip in his trotter. There was a deadly silence. Amazed, terrified, huddling together, the animals watched this long line of pigs march slowly around the yard. It was as though the world had turned upside down. Then there came a moment when the first shock had worn off, and when, in spite of everything, in spite of the terror of the dogs, and the habit developed through the long years of never complaining, never criticizing, no matter what happened, they might have uttered some word of protest, but just at that moment, as though a signal, all the sheep burst into their tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better.